Welcome to GameCube Gallery, the series where we are taking a look at the GameCube library one game at a time. In the previous episode of GameCube Gallery, we took a detailed look at one of my favorite GameCube games of all time, and that is Metroid Prime. Well, in today's episode of GameCube Gallery, we're taking a little departure from the last episode. We're taking a look at a game that's very rare, very expensive, and nobody really talks about it, and that is Samurai Jack: The Shadow of Aku. So let's go. Samurai Jack is an American cartoon that was created by Genndy Tartakovsky, and it released in 2001 on Cartoon Network and ran for 5 seasons. It is about a samurai who comes to be known as Jack, who tries to save his kingdom from the evil Aku, only to be sent far into the future where Aku has taken over the world. He must find his way back to the past so that he can stop Aku's long reign before it began. I started the show for the first time in my life in preparation for this episode and finished season 1, and so far I absolutely love it. The art direction and animations are stunning, the story is great, and it has a very dark atmosphere while still maintaining some silliness. I am particularly excited for season 5, the final season, because it released 12 years after season 4, and it is far more dark and mature and has won many awards. As good and as popular as the Samurai Jack series was, for some reason, there were only 3 games released. The first Samurai Jack: The Amulet of Time released on the Game Boy Advance back in 2003. Then in 2004 on the GameCube and PS2, we got Samurai Jack: The Shadow of Aku, which is the subject of today's video. Finally, in 2020, we got the highest rated and best Samurai Jack game, which is called Battle Through Time, released on pretty much all consoles from that generation. Samurai Jack: The Shadow of Aku was released on the GameCube and PS2 on March 24th, 2004, and is an action-adventure game featuring an original story based on the show. It was developed by Adrenium Games and published by Sega. Adrenium Games is a small studio that is no longer around, and they were under Amaze Games, who joined Foundation 9 Entertainment, which closed down in 2015. The other 2 games developed by Adrenium Games were Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events on PS2 and GameCube, and Azuric: Rise of the Parathia on Xbox. With all that out of the way, let's get into the story in Samurai Jack: The Shadow of Aku. There really isn't much to say here regarding the story, sadly. It is the exact same core story as the show that I described above, but with new scenarios, none of which are as interesting and exciting as the scenarios Jack encounters in the show. The story in the game is just a dumbed down and generic version of the show's story with nothing in it that will really grab or keep your attention. This results in a shallow experience that feels like a wasted opportunity considering some of the great source material in the show they could have pulled from. Sure, you will encounter a few cool characters from the show like the Scotsman and of course Aku, but that doesn't do enough to make it compelling. Now, I did appreciate the fact that both Jack and Aku were voiced by the original voice actors, because sometimes in video games we just don't get that, sadly. All in all, this game features a very forgettable and generic story, and that's just a shame. Now let's change gears and talk about the graphics, animation, and performance. The graphics in Samurai Jack: The Shadow of Aku are a bit of a disappointment and leave a lot to be desired. They aren't terrible, but they aren't great either. The most disappointing aspect is that they do not capture the essence of the art direction of the show, which is a shame because the show is visually stunning while the game just looks like another generic game. But with that being said, the graphics in the game at least have a cartoon look to them, at least with the character models. The environmental textures have minor detail and at least are not flat and muddy, so I will give it that. The game mainly uses more darker and muted color palettes, which somewhat matches the vibe of the show at least. Character and enemy models look fine, and there are a few interesting visual effects in the game like the flame sword and lightning sword. Cutscenes, however, are a bit rough looking with more angular and blocky looking characters and flatter textures, so I didn't care too much for those. Now I will say this, the animations were fluid, especially Jack's animations in combat with his various sword attacks. The performance of the game was a bit rough at times with frequent frame drops, especially when many enemies were on screen at once, but it was never enough to completely hurt the gameplay for me. So to sum up, the graphics, while they don't live up to the art style of the show, they are serviceable enough and not terrible by any means, just not great. The animations were good, but the performance suffered at times. Let's talk about the music and the sound design. One thing that Samurai Jack: The Shadow of Aku does well is the music and the sound design. The music isn't anything that's going to blow you away, but the music is pretty good and it fits with the theme of the game and gameplay. The music has an epic and action-packed feel to it while also sounding like something you would hear in a samurai movie or setting, which is the reason why it fits so well with the game. Here are a few examples of the music for you to hear for yourself to see what I mean. The sound design is decent as well, with plenty of ambient background noises to add to the atmosphere of the game. There are plenty of contextual sounds and gameplay cues for enhancing the combat and mechanics. Here, have a listen. Sushi. I'm not going to go into too much more detail because the music and sound design, while good enough, is still at the end of the day average and nothing that will blow you away. Now let's get into what I feel are the two most important things in a video game, and that is gameplay and the fun factor. So you might be saying to yourself, it's a Samurai Jack game, so the gameplay has to be fun, right? Right? Well, let's talk about it a bit. Let's start by talking about the overall structure of the game, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the gameplay. Samurai Jack: The Shadow of Aku is at its core an action game, and it takes place over the course of 4 worlds and 18 levels, with each world connected in a hub area. The goal of each level is to fight and platform your way to the end goal, which varies between levels but is usually something mundane. There are a handful of boss fights in the game, none of which are fun in any way, shape, or form, and they are all super easy, including Aku at the end. Each level is mostly linear with some light exploration but nothing crazy, and there are 3 different collectibles to find in each level. There are a number of locals to rescue in each level by destroying their cages, and this unlocks new magical sword types for you to use like fire, crystal, and electricity. There are also a number of relics to find in each level which you can spend in the hub world to upgrade your health, sword damage, and Zen energy meter. So in each world you will be hunting down these collectibles, platforming, and fighting. The platforming in this game is terrible and very frustrating. You can double jump, but something just feels off about the jumping, and it is very hard to tell where you will land because most of the time you have no shadow while you are in the air. So this leads to many deaths and missed jumps, and it is rage-inducing. The combat can be fun at times, but also frustrating, but at least there's a decent variety, so let's cover Jack's moveset real fast. You have a quick sword attack and a slow, powerful sword attack, and you can chain these together in combos. You can also do a sword slam attack while in the air. You hold L to block, and while holding L, you can press B in any direction for a dodge roll. Additionally, while holding L, you can press various combinations of A and X to perform special combo moves that slow down time and do massive damage. These moves are unlocked by finding special ancient scrolls hidden in some levels. You can also throw throwing stars and use a bow, and both use ammo that has to be replenished. Lastly, your Zen meter can be used to slow down time with the R button, which is the most useful ability in the game, and you can also use various elemental swords swords, which supposedly some enemies are weak to, but I found them to be a useless waste of your Zen energy meter. So I do like the variety in the moveset, and I did find almost all of these moves and abilities to be useful, but overall the combat still felt a bit janky and frustrating at times. The hitboxes in this game for certain enemies and objects were just downright bad, which made several sword attacks useless. Enemies seemed to sometimes arbitrarily block your attacks with no indication that they were going to be blocking. Also, the ability to hold down the L button and press A and X in certain combinations just did not work well in the midst of heavy combat. Instead, you had to get a short distance away from the enemies and initiate it as they were moving towards you. And again, the bosses were incredibly boring, basic, and easy. I will say this though, there was a decent variety in enemy types, so that was nice at least. Another issue is that Samurai Jack the Shadow of Aku is just too short, with the main story taking around 5 hours to complete and around 15 hours for completionists because you have to beat the game on all 3 difficulties to unlock everything, which is kinda dumb. In case anyone is interested, the fastest speed run is 1 hour, 30 minutes, and 34 seconds, which is actually pretty impressive. So there's a real lack of content here for a game like this, and that just kinda sucks. The gameplay here really had potential if they could have taken a bit more time to tighten things up and polish the mechanics more, but ultimately it fell flat and is average at best. But I will say I still enjoyed playing and beating Samurai Jack the Shadow of Aku, and I had some fun despite the overall averageness of the game, but I will never have the desire to play through it again. So let's move on to my conclusion and some other miscellaneous information about the game. So the story is very similar to the show, but without all the awesome scenarios Jack encountered, and instead replaced with boring and uninspired situations, leading to a story that ultimately fell flat. The graphics were not terrible, but they weren't great either, and they didn't capture the essence of the art style in the show, and the performance of the game suffered at times, but at least the animations were good. The music and sound design were well done and both added to the atmosphere of the game, but it isn't really anything that will blow you away or stick with you. And the gameplay and fun factor is there sometimes, and you can get some enjoyment out of it, but frustrating platforming and combat mechanics suck a lot of the fun out of it, especially in later levels. So at the end of the day, Samurai Jack the Shadow of Aku is an average game at best. It isn't terrible, but it also isn't great, and so as a result, I can't recommend the game because of how insanely expensive it is. Now, if it was $10 or less, I would say sure, pick it up, but it's not, as we're about to get ready to see. My thoughts are pretty in line with the critics and users, as on Metacritic, the average critic score is 59 out of 100, with 17 critic reviews, and the average user score is 6.2 out of 10 with 5 user ratings. In North America, the GameCube version sold around 10,000 units, and it sold around 20,000 units worldwide, which is just abysmal. For comparison's sake, the PS2 version only sold around 30,000 units in North America and only around 60,000 units worldwide, which is also really bad. Samurai Jack the Shadow of Aku is a rare game on the GameCube, and the price just keeps going up, as at the time of this recording, price charting shows the average loose price at around $46, the average complete price at around $83, and the average new price at around $113. I'm seeing current eBay listings for around $100 complete with shipping, and I'm seeing recent eBay sold listings for around $116 complete with shipping. Samurai Jack the Shadow of Aku is without a doubt a rare game on the GameCube, and I have never seen a copy out in the wild, not even at a retail game store, so GameCube collectors, I would say get it online before the price doubles in a year or two. Well, there you have it, folks. That is today's episode of GameCube Gallery on Samurai Jack the Shadow of Aku. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button, helps out the channel a lot. Let me know in the comments down below if you've played Samurai Jack the Shadow of Aku and what you think about the game in the comments down below. Also, let me know in the comments if there are any games you recommend that I cover in a future episode of GameCube Gallery. As always, folks, appreciate you tuning into the channel. Stay safe out there, keep playing games and having a good time, and I will catch you all in the next video. Later.